I did that once when I was at West Rawson, where I used to attend. I skipped over the choir, and I sat down. I was up in the pulpit, and I did whatever was next. And the choir, I noticed they just kind of looked around and then just settled down. And I looked at the bulletin, and I skipped the choir. And so I went over to the choir director, and I said, "Let's do you now." She said, "No, that's okay." And I said, "No. You guys prepared for this, so it's okay." What is it to be great? Who do you think of when you think of great people? Rulers: Alexander, Ramses, Tutankhamun, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Churchill, FDR. Authors: Shakespeare, Stephen King, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Billy Graham, John Cheever, Catherine Marshall, J.D. Salinger, Patricia Cornwell. Film stars: Clark Gable, Buster Keaton, Bette Davis, Charlie Chaplin, Gregory Peck, Lauren Bacall, Harrison Ford, Ingrid Bergman. Sports figures: Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, Johnny Bench, the Manning brothers, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Magic Johnson. Composers: Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Handel, Bernstein, Copland, McCartney, Vivaldi. Musicians: Yo-Yo Ma, Flatt and Scruggs, Itzhak Perlman, Nickel Creek, Benny Goodman, John Denver, Duke Ellington, Glenn Miller, Miles Davis, the Beatles, the Stones, Springsteen, Sting, Pete Seeger, Alison Krauss, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Artists: Rembrandt, Van Gogh, Monet, Manet, Picasso, Homer, Wood, Rockwell, Charles Schultz, Rebecca Bowman. Wealth, power, skill, talent, luck, all factor into people becoming great. People think about greatness a lot. Some, great in their own right, have said about greatness: the great man is the man who can get himself made and who will get himself made out of anything he finds at hand. Gerald Stanley Lee. A great man is made up of qualities that meet or make great occasions. James Russell Lowell. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon him. Shakespeare. David fits every category in the last one. Anointed by Samuel as a boy to be king. Born great. Became the king's armor bearer and killed the mighty warrior Goliath. Achieved greatness. Crowned king over all Israel at Hebron. Greatness thrust upon him. Our text begins, "Then all the tribes of Israel came to David in Hebron." Old Testament narratives are written with a literary device called the vav consecutive. The construction consists of a vav, the Hebrew W, being prefixed to a verb at the beginning of every sentence. In its simplest form, the vav is the conjunction and. The result, literally translated, is a very mechanical. So-and-so did this, and then he did this, and then he said this, and then he did this. So our text, beginning the way it does, indicates that it's continuing a larger narrative. But if we go back to the beginning of this saga, we could do a whole semester-long course. I will, though, give the story of Saul and David a short summary. What's been going on? David was anointed by Samuel when a shepherd. We don't know how much time passes until, known for his harp playing, he is enlisted to play for the king to relieve his insomnia and depression. When Goliath threatened, David, who had become Saul's armor bearer, and Saul's son, Jonathan, became best friends. David continued to be victorious in his military efforts. Saul felt threatened, then embraced David, then plotted against him, then welcomed him, then planned his death. Jonathan's friendship for David was constant and so deep that he warned David of his father's plan, and David was able to escape. Saul and Jonathan eventually met their end when facing defeat at the hand of the Philistines. David sincerely mourned their deaths, then was crowned king over Judah. Saul's only remaining son was assassinated. David is then crowned king over Israel, conquers Jerusalem, which he eventually makes the capital, and goes on to become the greatest king Israel ever knew. That's the short version. David is indeed a great man, agrarian, musician, poet, warrior, leader, strategist, politician, king, statesman. That's quite a resume. The elders come to David, and he is made king over Israel by acclaim. What was so great about this king of Judah that would make all the elders of Israel come to Hebron in the south and crown him king? I mean, other than that list of things that I just read. Well, here's the testimony of the people. We are your bone and flesh. Does this mean they are related? Not really, not anymore. David's from Bethlehem in the south. So although they claim the same forefathers, they are only distant relations at this point. Clearly then, they are speaking figuratively. So what do they mean? Where have you heard this before? This is the same sort of language Adam used regarding Eve. So the elders are saying, we are as close to you as your own ribs. We think as you think. We fight as you fight. We believe as you believe. In times past, when Saul was king over us, it was you that led out and brought in Israel. Saul was king, but David, it was you we followed into battle. It was your orders we followed. You kept us from being slain by the enemy. You brought us to victory. High praise indeed. During and after the Vietnam War, I remember hearing stories from Vietnam and previous wars about sergeants and ensigns who were the real leaders, though officers were in charge. According to these accounts, sometimes the officers were products of officer training school and were affectionately called 90-day wonder boys. They were placed unseasoned in command positions, and while they knew the theory of battle, they didn't have the experience. And while some became great leaders, some turned out to be ineffective leaders. The sergeants who served under them were the real leaders. They were the ones to whom the infantrymen turned to verify whether the officers' orders were valid. This is the kind of leader David was. He had a knack for it. Israel was saying, you are who we want to lead us now as well. And the Lord said to you, you shall be shepherd of my people Israel, and you shall be prince over Israel. David had been a shepherd. And then he had acted as a shepherd when he commanded men. And now he was being sought as a shepherd again, this time in the capacity of being a national leader. So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord. And they anointed King David king over Israel. This again is the no-frills account. The elders came, and David made a covenant with them. Without going into a long discussion of covenant theology, let me just give you the basics of covenant. There were two main things. First, it's two-way. Both parties enter into covenant. It wasn't, you're entering into covenant with me or else. Both parties entered willingly. And the second thing, accountability for both parties. If Israel didn't uphold its part of the agreement, David could take them to task. If David, the king, didn't uphold his part, the nation could say, "What's going on?" And they had every right to expect an explanation and repentance if appropriate. It gives a whole new understanding to God's covenant with Abraham. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years at Hebron. At Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. At Jerusalem, he reigned over all of Israel and Judah 33 years. That's a summary. 40 years as king, ruler of a nation. A long career for a king, certainly by our standards. We only get 8 years out of a president, whether they're good or bad. Verses 6 to 8 contain an account, a troublesome account, of David conquering Jerusalem. There are several reasons it's troublesome. It's intrusive. It contains a weak reason for renaming Zion the city of David. It just has lots of things in it. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who said to David, "You will not come in here, but the blind and the lame will ward you off," thinking, David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is the city of David, and David said on that day, "Whoever would smite the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul. Therefore it is said, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house." There's a lot of things that don't seem to fit. And then, the Jebusites are described as inhabitants of the land. David's been king over the district of Judah, which technically included Jerusalem, though it was a neutral city, for 7 years or so. So they must have had some sort of political relationship with him. The Jebusites seem to have no knowledge of David's military prowess if they're taunting him by saying, "He can't come in here, the blind and the lame will fight him off." And if David is a man after God's own heart, he would acknowledge the blind and lame as marginal members of society for whom God said the people should care. But here it says, David's soul hated the blind and the lame. Fortunately for me, we don't have to deal with these verses today. Today, they're just a vehicle for letting us know that David conquered Jerusalem. And David dwelt in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And David built the city round about from the Millo inward. What's a Millo? It's only used a handful of times in the Old Testament. It comes from the root word meaning to fill. So taken to mean that which fills up or occupies. It's used in connection with rampart, with granary, and with wine vat. Which is it here? Our translators didn't know. So they just transliterated it. They took the Hebrew letters and they replaced them with English letters. M-I-L-L-O. Milo. I looked at one version that used the terraces, from the terraces inward, which could make sense, but there was a little letter by the word terraces, and when you go down to the bottom of the page, there's a footnote that says Milo. Our passage this morning serves as a summary of David's reign, placed here at the beginning of the longer narrative of his reign. David had been a king. He was sought after to rule over another nation, which he united. This all began in his 30s. After being crowned, he was shrewd enough to choose a neutral city as the capital of the united North and South. Then he conquered the last stronghold, built a great city, and his reign totaled 40 years. David was truly a great man. And that's not all. And David became greater and greater. David became greater and greater. For the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. So, it wasn't that David was such a great man. David was a good servant of a great God. What then do we learn about being great from this passage? Our writer wanted us to know that greatness isn't about wealth, power, skill, talent, or luck. It's about serving God. We do that by following the example of Jesus, by serving others. Jesus summed it up later when in Matthew 20, the mother of the sons of Zebedee, Mrs. Zebedee, I guess we could call her, asked for recognition, greatness, for her sons in the afterlife. Jesus' response, "Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve." Again in Mark 9, the disciples had been discussing among themselves who was the greatest. And Jesus sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, "If anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all." These sayings, when it was still thought that the Messiah would come in military might, overthrow Rome, and set up his own kingdom, and the disciples would be on the inside. Owen Meredith said, "That man is great, and he alone, who serves the greatness not his own, for neither praise nor pelf, content to know and be unknown, whole in himself." Greatness through service. What does that mean to us personally? Do we fully understand that concept? We try to be of service to people in volunteer work, to our church, in our jobs, through military service to our country. What does it mean to us as a church? Community service, relief efforts, tithing, giving as individuals and as a group. What does it mean to us as a nation? We stand in a precarious place. We are a great nation, wealthy, powerful, vast, educated. Are we getting it? Are we great because God is with us? Are we serving the world and therefore God? It's a tough question. I didn't come here to condemn the actions of the U.S., and I didn't come to condone them either. I am not standing before you pointing a finger at you, because when I do that, there are three more pointing back at me. I came to share with you a little bit of knowledge and information about this text and the questions it raises for me, how it challenges me, and how it comforts me. It's here at the beginning of the story of David's reign. Read the rest of the story with this in mind. Despite his faults and failings, David became greater and greater, for God was with him. Now read your own story with this in mind. What questions does this text make you ask? How does it challenge you? How does it comfort you? You who have email know how sometimes you get mass emailings, warnings of viruses, urban legends, stories about Bill Gates donating 10 cents to a charity for every recipient of this email, so send it to everyone. I received one not long ago that had to do with greatness. It began with a quiz asking such questions as, who was the Super Bowl winner in 1976? The most valuable player of the 1965 All-Star Game? The winner of the Best Actor Oscar in 1959? Director of the best film in 1966? Richest man in the world in 1953? How is your life lacking if you don't remember these people? The quiz continued. Who was your favorite teacher in elementary school, middle school, and high school? Who was your favorite author? What people do you remember most in your life? What did you learn from these people? How is your life richer for knowing these people? The people who are great according to the world's standards may be in the news for a while and may occupy a place in a history book, but the people who are truly great are those who touch our lives, likely as not in a service mode. Who has been great in your life? In whose life are you great? young person once said to me when I had stated that I didn't think I really knew another young person very well, never underestimate the influence you're having in someone's life. That was comforting and also incredibly challenging. Was God with